Man City are playing chess, not checkers. Man City are now suing the Premier League. Yes, you heard me right. This comes after the Premier League charged Man City with the infamous 115 charges against them in relation to breaches in relation to their reported financial information between 2009 and 2018. The champions, 4 in a row champions, are at war with their own institution. Now, I am not a lawyer. I'm not an advocate, I'm not an attorney or anything, but I am a qualified chartered accountant, right? So in terms of financial information and reporting financial information on your financial statements, yes, I do have some sort of knowledge on that. But if we break it down, if you remember the 115 charges, they actually relate to basically 5 categories. One, it's the failure to provide accurate financial information. And then it's also about player payments and management salaries. It's also about rules in breach to the profit and sustainability rules and financial fair play, as well as the other 35 charges just relate to non-compliance with basically cooperating with the investigations since the Premier League was investigating them. So maybe things like stalling or hiding information and not disclosing the information that was needed at a specific time to help facilitate the investigation from the Premier League's perspective. For me, I think it's very simple, and I think there will be a domino effect. So for example, if the Premier League can argue their case about Man City being guilty for the first charge, failure to provide accurate information, they can kind of also then conclude that Man City did have something to hide and they were not cooperating with the investigations because they were guilty, and therefore City can be found guilty again of not cooperating. And because now you failed to provide accurate financial information, the Premier League can say this is actually maybe what should have been reported, and therefore that could be in breach of the other profit sustainability rules and financial fair play. So it's like a domino effect. Whereas if City can probably prove that no, they did not provide inaccurate financial information, rather, then they can then say that the information that they provided obviously is not in contravention of the profit and sustainability rules, as also financial fair play, and therefore they did not really necessarily fail to cooperate. They just provided maybe the correct information and the Premier League just were not satisfied, but also they had nothing to hide. So it can go either way for both parties involved. Now, Man City are taking the Premier League to court because they're saying some of these rules are actually against laws. So laws in relation maybe to competition and things like that. It's actually very powerful and could be impactful because Man City are trying to establish that the rules in the first place, some of these rules in the first place were unlawful to begin with, and therefore that could help their case tremendously when the 115 charges are heard in November, and obviously could knock down a few of those charges, because if they are unlawful in the first place, then there's no place to really enforce them or to find guilty of Man City when these rules are unlawful, like they're basically irrelevant. Yes, so for me, that might be a chess move, specifically because it could mean, well, this is alleged, that Man City are now, or they've done an assessment and a review, and they might find themselves in breach of some of these rules, and maybe they didn't expect themselves to be in breach of these rules because, maybe they believe that these rules are unlawful in the first place. But if they could knock that down, then obviously then they will be much more confident in whatever case that's being heard in November. So to me, that's just what it looks like. It looks like Man City are playing chess, because if they can eliminate or take down some of these rules, they won't be relevant anymore come the trial in November, and therefore even if they were guilty, I think it will be just scrapped because they were unlawful in the first place. So if we're actually talking about football now, in terms of real football, the rule is basically saying the valuation of sponsorships should be independently assessed to be of fair market value, right? All that means is that they're saying the owners of the clubs and other related companies, maybe for example Man City, it could be the Etihad and Etihad Airlines or other companies that the owner of Man City has, they can't just pump money into the team, unlimited amount of money, or provide any sponsorships and just provide a number and saying that's the valuation of that sponsorship, because obviously it will contribute to revenue, and that will influence how much Man City can spend on transfers. So now they can go buy Kylian Mbappe for 200 million, bad example because he was free, but they can just buy anyone with crazy amounts of money that they have received for their sponsorships. So now this is saying that no, someone or an institution that is objective should basically assess assess those deals and those sponsorships and actually come up with an amount that reasonably reflects what would happen or how much someone would pay if they were not related to you. Imagine it like this. You and your sibling, your brother or your sister or your father or your mother both have businesses and you are selling something to each other. One person can buy it for a crazy amount of money because that's what the other one is saying this is. But actually that might not be truthful. Why? Because if you were to sell it to someone who's not related to you, you could sell it for, let's just make a stupid example, 100 euros or 100 rand, depending on where you're watching, or $100. But now that, because you know you're selling it to someone that's close to you, you are selling it for 1,000. And this is just so that you can reflect a huge profit on your books. So basically, this is just saying that these should be audited and audited by someone that is objective and come to the same conclusion that no, whatever you sold or whatever the value of the sponsorship is, although it's coming from a related party, this would be the same as if it was coming from a completely separate business. And that is important in terms of the Premier League and competition because the rich can just keep getting richer. Your Man Cities, your Newcastles now that they're owned by the Qatari, your Chelsea now that it's owned by American state consortiums and private businesses and things like that. They could just keep getting richer because they'd pump crazy amounts of money in the team. Look at Chelsea. They've just put in $1 billion and spent it like crazy, and they could just keep on going without that ever being checked. Yes, this could literally stifle competition because the smaller to medium class teams, if we could refer to them as that, can't afford to go attract the world's best players to give them the world's most money, high wages, or pay huge transfer fees for them. And therefore the rich get richer, the big teams get bigger, the small teams get smaller. This will basically neutralize competition. And for me, I agree. As a football fan, I am a supporter of rules that are needed specifically in the football world, or laws that are needed in the football world to actually keep the sport thriving. The sport thrives on competition. And if we just let it go unchecked, then, we will lose a lot of giant killers and all those great Leicester stories. And yes, some Premier League teams, apparently there might be 10 to 12 that are in support of the Premier League in relation to this, that the Premier League has actually reached out and they need sort of their backing. But that could also mean that the other 8 teams are actually not in support of this. And you have to understand that that's coming from a purely business perspective. Football owners are businessmen and businesswomen, and they want to maximize shareholder value. They want to maximize profits by any means necessary, even if it's just to, kill the essence of sport. Maybe they might not be as passionate as football as you and I are. So unfortunately, that is the case. And if things are unlawful, they have a leg to stand on. And, they could just be right. Why can't they pump money into businesses that they own? It's their business and they want to do what's best for their business. And that's literally just making money, crazy amounts of money, and just growing and growing and growing the business. So unfortunately, that is, the case. Just to go back to the 115, I think, by the way, that this is not an easy case to try. Both sets of legal teams will have something to stand on, but it's not easy, for example, to convict Man City of these charges because they will have to be material. So, for example, material just means that information that Man City provided, if the financial information that they reported, like their revenue, is really, really much lower than it actually was, and the value of sponsorships was inflated, and that was inflated way and above over fair market value, then that will be a problem for Man City. But if it's something that is small, I do not necessarily know how that necessarily impacts the ruling and just how it's seen by the independent review team. And in this case, remember as well, if Man City did hide the amount of salaries that they paid to managers and to players, if that was omitted from the financials, that could also have a huge bearing on the ruling. But we know with Everton and Forest, they already got point deductions when there were not even that many millions in breach of the profit and sustainability rules. So, City are basically accused of doing that, and that is actually relating to fraud, and that is something called reportable irregularities. And basically, a reportable irregularity, it can be either one of these things, right? So basically, they have acted unlawful, or that is by possibly cooking the books, not reflecting the correct amounts of revenue reported or expenses by omitting them and leaving them out. And that is going to cause financial loss to Man City in a way that relates, for example, to point deductions. And obviously, the lower you finish in the Premier League, the less money you make, the more you could not make Champions League. Obviously, you won't win the title, possibly. That obviously affects how much money you win from participating in the Premier League, and maybe even just participating in the Premier League as a whole, because they could be relegated, right? And obviously, they will be fined huge amounts of money if they're in breach. And yes, Man City possibly acted in the way that is fraudulent. This is by possibly cooking the books, and this represents a huge breach by management and those in charge at the top at Man City, because they've basically allowed these things to happen, and they've either done it on purpose, it's as simple as that, or they didn't know, and that would represent a breach in their fiduciary duties, because they should have known as directors or people in top management to laws and regulations. So obviously this video is a lot longer than I wanted it to be, so I'll actually just end it here. Interesting to see what will happen to Man City. Will they win the case? And obviously whatever happens in this case will affect the 115 trial in November. Hope you enjoyed the video. Please subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.